Welcome, everyone, to the Watch Us Thrive podcast. Hello, everyone on Instagram. I'm super, super excited that we have Jannese Torres, who is my real life big sister. But more importantly, she is the new author of Financially Lit. If you don't have this book, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Okay. How does it feel, sis? How does it feel to be an author? Calling you that, it's like, has it hit yet?
No.
No?
I mean, yes and no, because obviously, I've been reading the book and I'm just like, I can't believe I wrote this shit. This is wild. My whole ass face is on a book. I feel like the impact of the whole thing will hit me in the future when I get the stories from people. And I've already started actually to get them of like, thank you for writing this because it's the first time that I have had even like the permission to be thinking about this, talking about this, just like unapologetically thinking about how you can build wealth. And I think it's still a very new concept for a lot of people in our community to even believe that like this is possible for us.
Yes. Anytime that I go into a bookstore and I see your face, it's like, "Yo, she did that." Like, can we just clap it up for her real quick? Because what you're doing out here, you're really changing lives with you sharing your own personal experience, your expertise. I'm just so fucking proud of you before we even get into it. Like, you're such an inspiration, not just to me, but to so many others out there. And we love to see it. I wanna see more of this, especially in our community when it comes to money.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And there's one chapter that I'm going to focus on for this conversation in regards to love, relationships, money, all of that. It's actually chapter 9. I went to the back of the book and read that first, and then I'm going through the book in its entirety to like read it through. But this chapter meant so much to me because there's so many different aspects that you talk about, and there's one aspect that you really highlight that I appreciate so much, which is financial abuse. And if you guys know, if you've been here around here for a while, you know that I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and this is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. And when it comes to money, I don't think we're talking about this aspect enough. So, talk a little bit about what exactly financial abuse is and why is it often called a hidden type of abuse?
Yeah. So before we get into that, I just want to say like this chapter wasn't even an original part of the manuscript of this book. And the reason why this chapter ended up becoming a part of the book is because I ended up navigating a divorce while I was writing the book. And so, just like in that whole process, in that whole journey, I was just like, oh my God, this is such an important topic. Just like, how do you protect yourself financially as a woman? How do you talk about money with your partner? Like, how do you avoid being in a situation where you are stuck in a relationship because of money? Which thankfully was not my situation. And I think it just like really reinforced how important it is for me to empower women, especially to become financially independent, because it's not just about like being able to say, oh, fuck this job, or I want to upgrade my living situation, or I want to buy a new car. It's like, no, money is actually a tool for you to actually escape like toxic ass situations. It is a tool that you can use to literally build freedom in your life. And so that whole experience just made me realize like this is a really important topic that needs to be part of this book. And so that's where kind of my inspiration for talking about this came from. But I was in a relationship that was very, very emotionally abusive. My ex and I had completely different philosophies on money. And one of the situations that I talk about in the book is that I found out that he had maxed out one of my credit cards without my permission to cover like legal fees and bullshit that he was getting into because he just was a person with chronic drama in their life and took no accountability for anything. In that process, I realized like, oh wow, like I am actually being financially abused because this person is out here using my resources, basically stealing money from me and feeling entitled to it because we're in a relationship, which is crazy. So, I wanted to talk about financial abuse in the book because obviously it's one of those things that we know it's happening, but I don't think enough people know exactly what it looks like. And I think the closest relationship that people might have to the topic is knowing somebody in their family or their friend circle who is literally stuck in a relationship because they don't have the financial means to do so. We all know somebody who is with a person who they know they need to leave, but literally they do not have the money to do it. They don't have the money to get their own apartment. They don't have the money to hire a lawyer. They don't have money for anything. And so that is the most sinister aspect, I think, of financial abuse, is this lack of access to resources that is literally preventing you from getting out of a situation. One of the startling statistics that I read, and I know you've talked about this too, is that in 99% of abuse cases, financial abuse is some sort of component. And of course, like, it makes sense because when you control somebody's access to money, you literally control their ability to survive. We need money for everything. We need money for rent, for gas, for food, for living. And so when somebody has that level of power over you, it is like being in a prison.
Hmm. You know, you talking about that, it's making me think about, I'm sure you've seen it. Social media has been up in arms around this whole Cassie and Diddy situation and the video that came out. What are your thoughts around that? And, her being in a relationship with someone with such power, endless amounts of money. She was trapped in that situation for years and it took her so long to speak out. What are your thoughts around that whole situation?
Well, I'm convinced that it's a multifaceted reason why people don't leave these types of situations. And I think, like, looking from the outside in, you're kind of just like, well, why are you tolerating that? Like, why are you dealing with that? And I know from my own experience, I was in a very long term unhealthy relationship. And there's something that happens, like, when it's your day to day, it feels normal. People looking at it would be like, what the hell are you doing? But it's almost like you're in a comfort zone. You're comfortable in the chaos. And so I think for her, obviously when you're dealing with somebody who is so powerful, like, has so much influence, has unlimited access to resources, and they have the ability to end your life because, we've heard some of these stories about the retaliation tactics that he was using against people. It's very easy to understand, like, why it would take so long to get out of that situation. And I think what happens too is that when somebody is very charismatic and has a lot of influence and is potentially a narcissist, they do a really good job of convincing people that they are one person, whereas behind closed doors, they're like somebody completely different. And then when you're the only person that's saying, like, no, this is all bullshit. The things that you're seeing are not actually who this person is, and this is actually who they are. People don't believe them. There's so much of that, like, victim blaming and just like, no, there's no way that could be happening. I think it's just a good reminder that, like, when people tell you that something's going on, like, believe them the first time.
The first time, like Maya Angelou said, when you see someone's true colors, believe them the first time. I couldn't agree more. So you're telling me that you didn't believe his apology?
Please give me a break. This man literally did not take any accountability. He made it all about himself. He didn't mention her name not once. He didn't mention anything that he did. He's just, it's all about me. I hit rock bottom. I got help. I'm doing better. Sir, it's giving narcissistic personality disorder. You need to be in a white room with pads and a straitjacket. Get out of here.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. If you guys followed me on social media, I was on one this past weekend. Like, I was just so triggered because I saw myself in that video. I saw myself in that situation, and I just felt so much remorse for her, the victim blaming that she was dealing with. Nobody believed her, and it took for there to be video evidence for people to finally be like, oh shit, really? Like, no, believe people the first time when it comes to this.
Well, and that, there's always people who are enablers in this situation too. I think about my ex, and like, his whole family was just straight up enablers, just making excuses for his behavior and like, oh, I'm doing too much or I expect too much. I expect the bare minimum from this person. Like, don't be a piece of shit. And if that's too much, we don't really need to be involved with each other's lives because honestly, like, the people who are out here abusing folks, they're not doing it in a vacuum. There is a whole lot of people in the surroundings that also enable this fuckery.
Yeah, for sure. 1000%. Okay, so I know there's a whole bunch in this chapter when it comes to talking about what financial abuse can look like. So if you want to just share a couple that stand out to you that maybe someone watching or listening, they might be in this type of relationship, but they don't really know how to identify. What are some signs of financial abuse that someone should look out for?
Yeah, so for me, it has like the basic definition of financial abuse is anybody who is using money to control you. They're somehow controlling or limiting your access to your finances. Some of the ways that people can do that is obviously like just straight up taking your money, using your credit cards without consent, demanding control over your paycheck, trying to give you an allowance, forcing you to have joint bank accounts so that they can see everything, requiring bailouts for every financial problem. That was definitely me. And just like there's more sinister kind of indirect ways that people can also do this to you too, like controlling your access to employment, especially when we think about this whole toxic ass trad wife movement that's on the internet right now, where like men are talking about women need to go back to the kitchen and go and raise my kids and you don't need to be out here working. That's a recipe for financial abuse because your man might be crazy about you and he's talking about, I'm gonna love and support you forever, and then at some point, maybe you're going to get older. You're not going to be as attractive to him no more. You haven't worked in 20 years. You don't have any money to your name. This man goes out here, has a whole ass affair, leaves you for a woman 20 years younger. Then what? You have literally no career experience, no education, no financial resources. You and your kids are out on the street because you thought that it was going to be happily ever after and you didn't make a plan B. And so I'm like, I don't give a shit how in love you are. I don't give a shit what this man is telling you about. You don't got to worry about nothing. I got you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to need you to have an investment account that is in my fucking name that you are contributing on a monthly basis to, because that is my emergency fund. I'm going to need you to have non-working spouse IRA where you are saving for my retirement if I'm going to be out here raising your kids and not working. And honestly, I feel like every woman just needs to have their own income stream. Like you can't even be relying on somebody else to be out here, quote unquote, saving for you because you got to be your own safety net. People change, shit changes. And while we never want to go into a relationship thinking like the worst is going to happen, the fact of the matter is you do not buy, like, let's say life insurance because you want to die young and quickly. But you're damn sure happy that you have some life insurance when you know that like your family's going to be taken care of if something happens to you, right? So it's the same shit with like we talk about prenups in this chapter too, about just maintaining your own finances. You don't ever want to think that like some shit's going to go down, but you're going to be so happy that you made those plans ahead of time if they do.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I want to talk about in regards to your own personal experience that you had a post-nup that practically saved your financial being after going through this divorce. So that shit was insane. We hear the word prenup and there's this negative connotation that like you're setting yourself up for a divorce before you even get married. How can we shift that narrative around that and also explain a little bit about what a post-nup is for people who have never heard the term before?
Yeah, so post-nup is not something that I even like really knew was a thing until I started getting into the world of money and just like wealth building. And I think there's obviously still so much stigma around the entire topic of prenups because of what we see in the movies. Prenups are usually associated with like some rich man who wants to marry like a 20-year-old and wants to basically like prevent her from getting on any of his money. But the fact of the matter is that women are building wealth at faster rates than men are at this point. Okay. We live in a different time where women are getting more educated, are starting businesses, are investing in real estate and the stock market, and just doing shit that like past generations of women either didn't even have access to or they just didn't have the information or the resources to do so. So, we need to be operating like rich white men have been operating for generations. And one of the ways to do that, especially because people nowadays are like getting married older. And so when you are getting married older, you have had more time to accumulate assets. You might have already bought your own house before you get married. You might already have some kids that you want to protect financially. You might have a whole ass empire out here before you decide to get married. And so if you want to protect those things, you have to put something in place. It's like saying, I'm not going to get medical insurance because I'm healthy right now and I don't really need to go to the doctor. That makes no fucking sense because at the end of the day, something can happen to you. You can walk out the door, slip on the stairs, break your fucking leg, and then it's like, oh wow, I don't have insurance because I'm healthy. And now I gotta pay out of pocket. And now some shit that could have been $50 is now gonna end up being a $50,000 surgery. You don't do these things expecting for something bad to happen, but you damn sure want to have a plan for if something goes left. And so the whole point of prenups is to protect your financial assets. You can dictate who gets what, whose accounts belong to what, to who, any kind of real estate property that you own, anything that's worth any sort of value. Talk about alimony, who's going to pay people alimony if we get divorced. Like all those things can be hashed out because it's much easier to have those conversations when you enjoy each other's company and when you still like each other versus when you're out here in divorce court and you fucking hate each other and you're just trying to like ruin each other's lives.
Shout out to Divorce Court. I fucking love Star Jones. I watch that every day at 1 p.m. Eastern on Channel 9, okay? That is my show. But it's the truth that it's better to protect yourself than to have the situation happen and then you're thrown back into survival mode and you're trying to figure shit out while you're bleeding and emotionally in turmoil and all this shit. It's better to prevent and prepare yourself for sometimes the inevitable. So, when it comes to having conversations around money, especially in relationships. It's not sexy. Nobody wants to have that type of conversation. Nobody wants to bring up, "Hey, if in the event we get a divorce, let's figure this out." In your expertise, in your opinion, how can we carefully navigate having that conversation with someone, and what are some key steps that you think someone could take in order to start the conversation?
So I'm glad you asked this because one of the reasons that I wrote this book is because half of the battle when it comes to money is just even knowing like what questions to answer when it comes to anything you're trying to do. And it's the same thing with prenups, right? One of the questions that I get over and over and over again from people is like, how do you even bring up this conversation? And so I literally have prompts inside the book on how you bring up a conversation. And I give you a lot of different scenarios in which like you could bring this topic up. So let's cover a few of them. Let's say that y'all both have some student loan debt. You could say something like, well, we both have student loans and other debts. How can we address these debts and protect ourselves individually? And one of the reasons that you have a prenup is because that's one of the things you specify. You specify if you were to get divorced and there is outstanding debt, let's say you have tax debt, you have mortgage debt, you have credit card debt, who's going to be responsible for what? Okay, so you can specify that. Let's say that somebody is going to start a business, which was my situation. You could say something like, well, if one of us owns a business or plans to start a business in the future, how can we safeguard this in the event that we get divorced? And so for me, I was like, well, it's important for me to protect my business because this is how I'm going to be earning a living. And so I want to specify ownership of this business in a postnup. And so a postnup is just something that you do after you get married. Let's say you didn't have the time or the money to do a prenup. A postnuptial agreement is something that you do after you get married.
Is it expensive to do that? To get a postnup?
It depends because if you do what I did and I had access to legal insurance through my employer, I ended up paying no money out of pocket for my postnup. Standard prenup or postnup can cost you a couple $1,000s. I'd say anticipate like 2,500 to $4,000, somewhere around that. But when you think about the potential cost of a divorce, which could be like in the multiple six figures and up, depending on your level of assets, it's a definitely a good investment. One other thing I want to bring up too is there's a lot of folks who get married and they already have kids from previous relationships. One of the reasons why you would have a prenup is because you want to make sure that those children are protected financially. And so that could be a reason why you bring up a prenup. It's like, hey, I have my two children. I want to make sure that these specific assets go to them. So let's do a prenup so that I don't have to worry about that. There's a lot of different ways that you can bring up the conversation. I think if you are in a relationship where communication is not your strong suit, this is where you need to potentially get a therapist, get a financial counselor. Obviously, you definitely want to work with an estate planning and family law attorney to get this documentation set up. But if somebody's giving you pushback about a prenup, it's a red flag for me because it's meant to protect both people. It's not meant to exercise some sort of unequal power dynamic over somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when it comes to income differences when being in a relationship, and I'm sure that's something that you experienced in your marriage, when there's a big income gap between partners, how can they fairly divide financial responsibilities?
For me, it's always going to come down to each person should be using an equal percentage of their income. So, like, let's say you're in a position where you make $100,000 a year, but your partner makes 50, then you have to divide the expenses based on percentages of income. So let's say that your mortgage is $4,000 a month. I would say like 3,000 would come from the higher earner and then 1,000 would come from the lower earner. So that way like it's an equal percentage of their income, but they're contributing equally. Cuz I think there's this perception, well, 50-50 has to be the thing, and it's like that doesn't make sense if you're not making the same amount of money. So you have to go based on percentage, and I give you calculators inside of the book and some resources for how to figure out how you could equally divide those expenses based on your income.
Yeah, I love that. Again, we're talking to Jannese Torres, who is the author of Financially Lit. Get your copy today, financiallylitbook.com. Let's talk a little bit about people who are not married, who are not even in serious relationships, but they're in the dating world. When do you feel like it's appropriate to start having that conversation around money early on in relationships, and how can we navigate that in a way that doesn't run people in the opposite direction?
Well, I think you can start to do that process very early, not necessarily by asking directly, like, hey, how much money do you make? But asking somebody, what they do for work is one of those ways that you can start to assess like what somebody's financial situation is. I know when me and my partner were first dating, we were talking about finances pretty early on in the relationship. And a lot of it was just around kind of understanding how each other grew up. And so one of the things I found out early was like he didn't have any credit cards. And I was like, "What? Like that's weird, bro." He's and he's like, "Well, my dad was a Dave Ramsey follower and so he doesn't believe in credit and like credit scores and none of that. So he said like if you ever want to buy something, you just pay it in cash." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool, but also like you need a credit score because if you ever want to buy a house, you're not gonna pay for a fucking house in cash. Most people just cannot do that." So, I started introducing him to the idea of points and rewards that you can get with credit cards, and he was just like mind blown. I'm like, I just booked a free flight to PR with credit card points. And he's like, well, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I helped him, figure out what credit card to open. Now he has a couple of them. He's got like a 700 plus credit score. Whereas when I first met him, he had like a 500 something credit score because then not because he had bad credit, just he had no credit, because it was just not one of those things that he learned about. And so I think, learning about each other's kind of money values and like what your financial situations were like growing up, I think is a good place to start. And then you definitely want to get like more concrete discussion going on when you're thinking about moving in together or you want to start taking vacations and stuff together. You want to start using money jointly. That's when you really need to start asking like serious questions like, hey, what's your student loan situation like? Or how much credit card debt do you have? Or what's your savings philosophy? Like, do you have a checking and a savings account? How much of your money do you like save on a monthly basis? Do you have an investment account? That's another thing too. He didn't have any kind of investments because he didn't have any context about like how that works. And so I helped him set up his own IRA account. And now he's investing in the stock market. And it's just like you can help each other make financial progress, but the wrong person will make you fuck up your finances. So it's important to like get the story. Get the story.
Yes. 1000%. Okay, so answer this question. How can financial freedom get you out of a toxic situation? Why is that so important to have financial independence?
Oh my god. You have to be financially independent because at the end of the day, like that is what gives you access to the escape plan. And I knew I was going to file for divorce. I didn't for a second have to worry about how am I going to keep a roof over my head or now what am I going to do for health insurance because I was getting my health insurance through my ex-spouse because he was fully employed. I'm like, "Oh shit, now I got to go sign up for a plan on the marketplace cuz I'm self-employed." I didn't have to worry about any of that. I could actually just like focus on taking care of myself physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, go to therapy, work out, spend time with my friends, just heal. And that I think was the most eye-opening experience for me in the whole process of getting divorced was just like, holy shit, I literally get to just like recover from this mentally and emotionally and I don't have to worry about recovering from this financially because I have all my shit. The difference, honestly, sometimes between life and death Financial independence is not something to take lightly. It's not something that is optional. It is something that is essential to your survival as a person, but especially as a woman.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm curious, for someone who's listening and who's been following and watching your story, it's so inspirational to see who you've become and how you've been able to make that happen. So for someone who's right now in the throes of financial ruin, especially when it comes to a relationship, how can they start to build themselves back up, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally? How can they start to see the light at the end of the tunnel when right now it might feel like there's no fucking way out?
I think the first thing you're gonna have to do is start asking for help, and I think when you're in a emotionally abusive or just a toxic relationship in general, one of the ways that they operate, like your abuser operates, is by isolating you from your community. And that's very intentional so that they can control you. And so I know for me, I had to lean very heavily on my community, on my friends, my family. And so if you are lucky enough to have someone in your corner, don't be afraid to ask for help. I've seen friends who have had to start from zero after leaving toxic relationships. And sometimes that looks like moving back in with your parents, selling everything that you own, just literally restarting life, committing to the struggle because there's a purpose for that. And understand that money is an infinite resource. There's always the opportunity to get more of it, but what you do not have the chance to get more of is your time. And so don't fucking waste it on trying to make some shit work that's not going to work. Choose yourself. The money will come, but you have to get out of a situation that is literally like taking your most precious resource, which is your time.
Stop letting somebody's dusty ass son stress you out, okay?
Yes. Facts.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's so important, like you said, to lean on community. When I think about everything that happened to me, I called the person that me and you know, she called you. And that was the reason why I was able to escape from a situation that I almost lost my life in. And that happened because I decided to speak up and talk about what was happening. I let go of that shame. I let go of that guilt, that embarrassment, that fear when it came to me almost dying was necessary in order for me to like, okay, some shit has got to change and I need to lean on the people that I know will come through if and when that's necessary. And shout out to you because literally you and Giovanna, you guys saved my life when that happened.
It's the power of speaking up.
Yes, absolutely. What do you want people to take away from reading this entire book? I mean, it's not just about love and relationships. She talks about investing, she talks about side hustle, she talks about financial trauma and mindset and everything in between. So, what do you want people to take away from reading your experience and your expertise?
I think I want folks to understand that this whole journey with like becoming proficient with money is a lifelong endeavor. It's written in a way that every chapter builds on itself because as you level up in your life when it comes to money, there's just always going to be different challenges, obstacles, revelations that you're going to have and overcome. And so I think it's just important that people understand like wherever you are in your financial situation does not need to be where you stay. And that's why I want people to get a copy of this book because it's literally written as a way to like guide you throughout your life, regardless of the place that you are. So if you're just like first starting out, you're graduating college, you don't know how to deal with your student loan debt, you want to set up your first budget, you want to get your first apartment, like this book is going to help you do that. If you want to start investing for retirement, this book is going to help you do that. If you want to set up your kids for financial success, this book is going to help you do that. If you're going to get married, you want a prenup, you want to create an estate plan, like everything that you need to know about money is going to be in this book. And so I want folks to finally stop being afraid because fear is the most common reason why we don't make the progress and the decisions and the changes that we need to make. And what I've come to the realization is like 9 times out of 10, fear is the reason why people don't do something. And the reason why they fear something is because they don't understand it. And so if you want to empower yourself to be better with money, you need to understand how it works. And so that's what I hope that you get out of reading Financially Lit because it's not complicated, y'all. It's just money is masked with a bunch of jargon and language and terminology and bullshit that makes you feel dumb. because you don't understand it. And so I'm breaking this shit down in a way that you can finally feel seen, heard, and understood.
Yes, snaps to that. And how can we as a community best support you? How can we find the book? When is book number 2 coming out?
I am not writing another book for a while because this was quite a project, but I'm so proud of how it's come out, and I'm so proud of the reception that it's getting. You want to support the book, please get your copy. I have the audiobook version as well, so I was able to narrate the book. So if you want me to read it to you, definitely go to financiallylitbook.com, pick up your copy wherever you buy books. And I am on a book tour at the moment, so stopping at a bunch of different cities across the US and even Puerto Rico. So if you want to get your ticket to a book tour stop near you, financiallitbook.com, please make sure to leave a review, get a copy for your friends and family, like tell your local library to stock this book. It is really the first of its kind, and I want it to be the first of many books that are written, especially for the Latina community when it comes to money.
Yes, get the book, y'all, okay? Financially Lit, The Modern Latina's Guide to Level Up Your Dinero and Become Financially Poderosa. Sis, I fucking love you. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for coming back on the show. This is her second appearance. I just thought the first episode that you recorded, you were married. And now this one, she's out here thriving, living her best life. I love you, sis. Thank you so much. Keep paving the way. Keep being the badass bitch that you are. You are out here inspiring so many, and I'm just so excited to see what's to come. Oprah, Gail, we coming for you, sis, okay?
Thank you, sis. And I want to say to you and your audience, thank you for all the work that you're doing because you're changing lives out here.
Love you.
Love you.
Bye, guys.